So what can an injury history tell us? Especially as a performance therapist, the injury history, it provides it a really abundant amount of information for our work. I think this is something that just generally speaking across strength and conditioning, speed, performance therapy, physical therapy, um, that is almost undermined or neglected, where we see it as this thing that occurred and it's in this box. Like we'll touch on it, we'll go through it a little bit, and then okay, now we're off and up and running. I think that the injury history for athletes should be much more operationalized. Even when there's a minimal injury history, it still tells us a story, and that's really what we try to utilize it for, is really understanding the mission of the athlete from where they've been to where they are in front of us now. So this is going to have a really strong influence on how we go about our initial treatment plans, obviously, how we're going to go about our initial training programming or planning. But then also, too, this gives us a lot of insight as to how we can expect the athlete to compensate. So if we have multiple stress fractures on the right foot, and then we've had a hip labrum on the left side, and then maybe one or two upper body injuries, a biceps injury or something, that gives us a pretty clear outline for, okay, well, what are they probably going to do on the right foot? Well, they're probably going to want to offload it quickly. They're probably not going to want to spend as much time on the ground. If this is an athlete who has a lot of air time in their sprint or their movement strategy, we're getting a lot more ground reaction forces on that side. So we're then going to see these, this sequence of compensations up the chain. And using this hypothetical example, a situation where we have multiple stress fractures on the right foot, that's something that's likely going to propagate a labrum injury on the opposite hip, because we're going to start to see them over pushing through that left side to kind of, offload that right foot. So getting this back to the point, we need to see this as being a living, breathing document. Even if we haven't had an injury in 3 or 4 years, even if we only have a couple of things that are listed on our injury history, we need to understand that this is something that is a dynamic thing in and of itself. The way that we really evaluate this and the kind of key criteria that we look at is, number one, the location and the severity or extent. So we have, foot, knee, hip, shoulder kind of being the main joint areas, and then we have the corresponding tissues from there. But what was the actual site? What was the severity of injury? Grade 1, 2, or 3? Was it a complete rupture? Then we need to know, was there surgery performed? Surgery is not a passive procedure. Again, this is another one where we just kind of brush over it sometimes, but when you get put to sleep and have your body cut open and then have an artificial implant put in there, there's something different about your body coming out of that experience. The next thing is how much time was lost. A good example of this is like plantar fasciitis or an ankle sprain. On paper, those don't look like really damning injuries. But if you look at the extent of time that is missed commonly with things like plantar fasciitis or like a grade 3 high ankle sprain, we're talking about sometimes 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks of time that was just either completely lost or disrupted severely. The longer that the athlete was immobilized, the greater the consequences are coming out on the other side. So this is a good piece of information for us to really kind of evaluate, okay, what may have been the changes in length tension relationship of the tissue? What could have been the nociceptive or proprioceptive changes that occurred during that time? What did it result in any kind of true structural changes pre to post injury or pre to post time loss? The last thing that we're going to look at is the clustering or the proximity relationship of the injuries. So again, having one injury on the right lower leg versus having 4 injuries on the right lower leg is a totally different outcome. So this clustering effect is another layer that we look to see, okay, now how has this changed kind of the total system or the global system, based on having this multitude of recurring injuries. And then the last couple of pieces on note with that, was there a re-injury at the same site or the same injury? Did we have to go in and do a revision surgery? Those are really key indicators that the injury did not necessarily heal properly the first time around and could be an indicator for ongoing or potential, upcoming issues or problems. And then recency being how much time have we been removed from that injury? And this one's a little bit more obvious, but there's a big difference between an ankle sprain 3 weeks ago and 3 years ago. So we want to think about all of these different factors. And again, in the coach practitioner space, Don't see this as just a quick item that we have to check off for, cover your ass type of reasons early on in our relationship with an athlete. We want to take our time, make sure we are thorough in evaluating what these things were, what was the process or procedure behind them, are they still having challenges or difficulty from these injuries, and just see this as a continuously living document that has a ongoing influence for the athlete.